Welcome, everybody. My name is Jim Chilson. I'm Director of Communications for the Citizens Utility Board, or CUB, and welcome to our third members-only event of the year. The year is going very quickly. These events are a special thank you to all of you who support CUB's mission of advocating for utility customers here in the state. And so on behalf of the entire CUB team, we thank you and we appreciate you. Also, welcome and thank you to CUB Board President Robert Craig Neff and board members Stephen Hall, Marty Cleves, Tom Sykes, and we even have a future board member here, Douglas Becknell. We appreciate your support. The topic tonight is Get to Know CUB Executive Director Sarah Moskowitz. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, Jim. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining.
You all have given us a great bunch of questions. We hope we can get to all of them. We may not be able to, and if we don't get to one of your burning questions, please just reach out to us this week. You can reach out to me, Jim Chilson, CUB Director of Communications, and I will do my best to answer your questions and talk to the smart people at CUB and get good answers for you. So before we dive into those questions, let's talk a little bit about Sarah. On June 20th, CUB announced it had entered into a new era. Longtime consumer advocate Sarah Moskowitz was CUB's new executive director. We bid a fond farewell to David Collado, who took a position in the clean energy industry. At the time, Sarah said, "I'm grateful to my CUB colleagues and the thousands of utility customers I've worked with over the years. They made me a better consumer advocate and have prepared me to lead CUB at this key moment as we challenge unprecedented rate hikes and help usher in the clean energy future. Illinois consumers need a tough consumer advocate in their corner, and our team is up to this historic task." Like I said, we've got a lot of great questions from CUB members tonight. We're going to try to get to all of them. But Sarah, let's start by learning a little bit more about you. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Jim, I liked how you put an emphasis on "at the time," so as if my opinion has changed since then. But actually, I'm still having fun. I'll let you know if I'm not. But yeah, thank you. And Jim and I have known each other for a long time. I started at CUB in July of 2000. And Jim had been at CUB for 3 months when I started. And I still remember on my very first day, I showed up kind of early. And I think Jim was the only person there. And he went and got me a glass of water.
That's right.
I was waiting for my then boss, who's still at CUB, by the way, to show up and tell me how to do my job. So thank you again for that, Jim. Yeah, a little about me. I've lived in Chicago since 1995. I moved here from the DC suburbs. I lived in Virginia up until then. Moved from DC to go to college here in Chicago. And I ended up falling in love with the town and with Illinois. When I graduated from college, I just knew two things. I knew I wanted to stay in Chicago, and I knew I wanted to work at a nonprofit. And those were different times. Now, of course, kids need to start basically applying for jobs or preparing for jobs before they even start college. But it was the 90s. Like when I was in college, it was different. And I feel very grateful for that because I think it's a lot tougher out there now. Got called in for an interview to work on CUB's hotline, got the job, and just it changed my life very obviously. So yeah, I'm an East Coaster originally, but I am now a full-on Midwesterner. I think I'm a lifer here. And what else do you want to know, Jim?
Well, I do remember that first day getting you a glass of water, you and Martin Nava. I remember being intimidated by you, to be honest. You were tough and smart. And I thought she really knows her stuff. And I saw her in action advocating for consumers, which was great. So what else did you do at CUB though? You did 2 years on the consumer hotline. Then what did you do?
Yeah. So first, just a little bit about the consumer hotline. I still believe that is the most difficult job at the organization. I don't know how many of the folks on the call or even the people who donate to CUB are aware of just the fantastic, good work that our consumer rights counselors do. I couldn't hack it for more than a couple of years. It was really, I was sleepwalking. I was having dreams, like I had to do art therapy. I mean, it's hard. You're talking to folks in crisis all day. You know, people who simply can't afford their bills or who got scammed in some way. And it's tough. It's tough to be to be confronted with that every day for your job. So hats off to our consumer rights counselors. It's not only important for the folks that we're interacting with and for the folks that we're helping, but it's also really important for us as an organization, because that's how we know what's going on out here. That's how we know we need to try to get something introduced in Springfield to bring a company under control, or that's how we know we might need to take legal action, or that's how we know we need to at least put out a press release or do a press conference. So that, I don't want to underplay that part of my career, because it was formative, it was enraging. I already was kind of dedicated to doing good and to furthering the public good, but seeing how these policies impacted people in ways that were devastating was really made me mad. But it also was a very good training on what's going on and how all of these issues work together. I think part of what's great about being at CUB is, in order to explain what's going on to the layperson, you really have to understand it very well. And so there's a lifelong learning aspect to this work that I adore. And I think it's why a lot of us, you included, Jim, have been at the organization for so long. When I first started at CUB, the biggest issue we were facing was landline telephone bills. Good old Ameritech made my life hell. And look at us now. Unfortunately, landline telephone bills aren't as big an issue. There isn't as much oversight on that, as a lot of CUB members know, and it's something that we continue to struggle with. We are going to try to introduce legislation that would reinstate the consumer's choice plans, which are those inexpensive safe harbor packages that we managed to get Ameritech, AT&T, SBC to introduce several years ago, but they've slowly phased those out. But we haven't given up on that, because they are necessary for vast swaths of our state still.
It still makes me mad. It still makes me mad. That is a tool for a lot of consumers that would be really helpful, even in the iPhone age now, would be really helpful, and AT&T has just turned their backs. So I love it that Brian McDaniel is fighting the good fight down in Springfield, trying to bring those plans back.
Yep. Yeah, so I did that for 2.5 years, and went back to grad school to get a master's in social service administration, social work. But while I was doing that, I continued to work at CUB 1 day a week as an administrative assistant, basically doing everything from putting together mailings, running postage, working reception, you name it, like filing, troubleshooting our folding machine. We used to have a folding machine. I think I was the only person in the office who knew how to run it, which I thought was real job security. And then when I graduated with my master's, I was kind of at a crossroads. I got a job offer from a social service agency to become a social worker there. And at the same time, CUB got some funding to basically start up a consumer grassroots education and outreach effort around landline telephone bills. And it's like, well, I went to school for this thing, but I really love working at CUB. It's a really fun place to work, and we're really making a difference. And I decided to go with my heart and stick with CUB and stick with all my fantastic colleagues. And I am so pleased that I did that, because I had so much fun starting up our outreach department, traveling around the state, talking to consumers about all kinds of things, and learning a lot along the way, using those learnings to influence policy at the state level. And did that for, 13, 14 years. Yeah. Before I became deputy director, right before COVID, essentially. And then just recently executive director.
And Sarah's being very modest. built that program, the outreach program, into a nation-leading program. I mean, there are very few groups that were doing 400 to 500 free events a year, staffing those and just giving good information to consumers. And just a shout out again to the people who run the consumer hotline. I just need to mention their names. Sandra Marcelin Remay is still at CUB and hired Sarah. She's still the director of consumer advocacy. Ani and Danielle keep working the phones and have been doing it for years and do a great job. So we can dive into the questions if you're ready to do this.
Mm-hmm.
There is a question that it's a good segue because this is the kind of calls that the consumer advocacy department has been getting a lot over the last couple of years. This is Charlotte, and she says, People's Gas has an exorbitant customer charge. I used 5 therms and 7 therms of gas during the summer. I paid over $60 for gas service. This is ridiculous. $10 per therm. What can be done about this customer charge? Really easy question to start off here.
Yeah, really easy. I'm glad you asked, Charlotte. As it happens, we actually sent out an email to our membership earlier this week. Was it this week? About this very thing, or maybe it was last week, about this very same thing. It was a picture of one of my colleagues' bills showing that she was charged by People's Gas over $60 for $2 worth of gas. And this is because People's Gas has been on a spending spree permitted by the Illinois General Assembly, a law they passed about 10 years ago that allows the gas utilities, not just People's Gas, but People's Gas is the one that has really made the most hay out of it. That allows the gas utilities to basically pass on the costs of infrastructure upgrades automatically to their customers without regulatory oversight in advance. Now, they are audited after the fact by regulators, but we're so far behind on that. Right now, we're looking at costs that People's Gas incurred for their gas main replacement program from back in 2016. This has basically been a huge cash cow for the gas utilities. We fought it from the get-go. We knew that's what this was when they went to Springfield. Basically, they went to Springfield to get permission from lawmakers to bypass the regulatory process. And why they were able to do that is a conversation for several more webinars in the future. I'll just say kind of glibly, I actually did a webinar the other day where we got this question. I said glibly, our government affairs guy in Springfield, Brian, when I ask him about it, he shakes his hand. He says, Moskowitz, it's an alternate reality down there. I mean, it's really true. So basically, like People's Gas has been hiking up our bills for the past several years. Those charges that have been passed on to us for this replacement program, which, by the way, is way over budget. It's more than quadrupled. It was anticipated it was going to be just a couple $2 billion. And now estimates for the cost of the program have skyrocketed to upwards of $11 billion. An audit showed that they have been running it uneconomically. There's been a lot of waste in the program. We've been contacted by whistleblowers saying as much. And this has all been done without any evidence that the upgrades that they're doing have actually been necessary. Now, there are definitely some needs to maintain the system, and we're not arguing against that. But basically, the utility has used this provision to just do it all and pass the costs on automatically to all of us. So I could talk about this for a long time. And then, of course, I'm going to keep talking, Jim. I know you unmuted yourself, but I'm going to keep talking. Now, of course, People's Gas, along with all the rest of the utilities in the state, have come in for a huge rate increase. And so we're in the midst of fighting a $402 million People's Gas rate increase. And they like saying like, hey, we haven't been raising your bills. We haven't had a rate increase in 9 years, but that is untrue. They haven't gone to the Illinois Commerce Commission for a rate increase, but they have been raising our rates through this back door that was allowed by the Illinois General Assembly. So that all of that money that you're paying, Charlotte, that's showing up on a charge, that's coming from a charge on your bill called the Qualified Infrastructure Plant, or we call it QIP. It's also part of that is rolled into your monthly customer fee. And I do a lot of traveling around the country, talking to other consumer advocates, giving presentations on the situation in Illinois. And I had someone come up to me after a presentation I gave on the gas situation in the city of Chicago, in which I'd said that fixed costs for people's gas customers are now over $50 a month. And someone came up to me kind of smirking, saying like, oh, you misspoke. You said 50, but you meant 15. I'm like, no, I did not mean 15. I meant 50. People don't believe me when I say that. This is not normal. It's crazy. And folks in other states are looking at us being like, what the heck? And so we are working now to fight that rate hike, fight this unprecedented, this out of control spending, and start looking at ways to transition to more affordable forms of heat for our homes.
That's right. I was going to bring up the future. Also, one of the good pieces of news is Brian McDaniel, the good work of Brian McDaniel and other consumer advocates, is that the QIP is going away at the end of the year. It's sunsetting. There was huge concern that the gas utilities in the state were going to fight to continue that. However, People's Gas has said, well, now we're going to go before the Illinois Commerce Commission and ask for yearly rate hikes. So there's going to be a lot more. So Charlotte, we feel your pain, and a lot of neighborhoods are going through just great suffering. I think, what is it? 1 in 5, about 1 in 5 People's Gas customers are having a hard time affording their bills. So this is a major problem. And as Sarah said, you need to start planning now for a transition away. Do you have anything to add to that? I can go on to the next question.
We've got a lot more questions, so I will leave it there.
Okay. Inflation Reduction Act. This is from Susan. Inflation Reduction Act, along with the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act here in Illinois, Inflation Reduction Act in Washington, major pieces of legislation that have the opportunity to save consumers a lot of money on their energy bills. Susan asks about the Inflation Reduction Act. Has Illinois developed a program under the Federal Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 to give residents rebates for purchasing and installing an electric stove to replace a gas stove? I can't find it online or at the Illinois EPA's Office of Energy.
Great question. So portions of the Inflation Reduction Act are already in place, like the tax credits are in place, but I don't believe that those cover induction stoves.
Right.
There are going to be state-run portions of the Inflation Reduction Act that are going to be run by the Illinois EPA, but those aren't in place yet. We expect those to go into effect in spring or summer of 2024. Meanwhile, however, there are a plethora of other programs that are under development thanks to Inflation Reduction Act funding. One that CUB is working with some partners on is for making solar more affordable. There are some opportunities there, but those grants haven't even been submitted yet. And once they are, it will still be quite a bit of time before any of those programs are up and running. So it's been kind of rolling out bit by bit, but as of yet, there aren't any. Now, there are quite a few incentives in place already at the state level for various kind of clean energy and more efficient technologies, and CUB has a plethora of resources on our website about how you can get connected to the incentives that are out there, but there's a lot more to come. For example, we were at CUB in working on a group buy for heat pumps, for air source heat pumps. We decided to put that on hold until the IRA incentives came out, because we didn't want to get a bunch of people getting heat pumps installed when it turns out they could have saved thousands of dollars if they'd done it the following year. So we decided to put that on hold. Although we are still running our ground source heat pump or geothermal geothermal group buy program, although we did kind of slow down our promotion of that program because uptake was so high. Our installer partners were having a hard time keeping up with the consumer interest, which is a good problem to have, but still a problem. So as I was talking, I'm thinking about like how many programs there are and how confusing it can all be, and how some of them are available to everybody and others are available to people according to, you know, their income. And all of this underlines why an organization like ours is so important, because it's a lot to figure out. And when I was looking at the list of questions that folks submitted ahead of this presentation, you know, a lot of them are just about what kinds of incentives are out there to go solar, et cetera. And it's insufficient to just you know, implement the program. There also needs to be coupled with a lot of consumer education, or
That's
else
right.
it's not going to work.
That's right. We have a lot of work to do updating guides over the next 6 months to make sure to stay up with the Inflation Reduction Act. We did have one question, and I just want to go back to the gas thing. What kind of help is available for senior citizens on a fixed income to help with increasing gas bills? I think part of this would be LIHEAP opening up in a few weeks.
Yeah, there's not enough. There is not enough help, that's for sure. But there is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. It is a federal program that is administered by the state through local agencies. And if you look up just, you know, Illinois LIHEAP, you can, I think there's tools where you can enter your zip code and get connected to the office near you. CUB Help Center.com also has information about financial assistance. The federal program is supplemented by the state of Illinois, which is nice. Not every state does that. So we have a little bit more funding than maybe some other states do, but it's still nowhere near enough. And meanwhile, however, more people need to be taking advantage of it. It's understandable. A lot of people don't know about it, but also I think a lot of people just don't feel right, perhaps thinking that maybe, you know, other folks are more deserving. But this is a program that was created to help people who are having trouble paying their bills. So if you or anyone you know is having trouble paying their bills, that's the first place to go. Different utilities also run programs, but most of those are still administered through the same agencies. So getting connected to those agencies is a great first step. Also, just knowing your rights, understanding that if you're having trouble paying your bill, it really behooves you to get in touch with the utility and work out a payment arrangement. I know it's stressful. I know that when you're behind on your bills, you don't want to open that mail because you know it's not going to be good. But if you don't have an arrangement on the books with the utility, once you're behind, you can get shut off. And that's the worst thing that can happen, because once you get disconnected, your rights as a customer go out the window. And it's a lot more difficult to deal with them. So preventing disconnection is priority number one. And if you have questions or have issues with it, you can always call CUB and we can connect you to resources too. And
Dorothy, I know your email address. I will send you the Help Illinois Families website. Also, and Sarah was right, that's a great source. Utilities are a great source to contact them and be proactive about that. Also, Lawrence, thank you for adding to this. He says, go to your township or county and talk to the Human Services Department. In DuPage County, they help with water and gas and electricity if you qualify. And I am on LIHEAP right now, and it's great. So thanks, Lawrence, for giving us that. Let's go on to the next one, if that's okay.
No, wait, Jim, I have one more thing to say.
Please.
Sorry, this is what we do. We all give Jim a hard time, folks. Sorry. I was going to say, what was I going to say? Oh, so one interesting thing in CEJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, was that it required the utilities to consider offering low-income discount rates to their customers. And in fact, the gas rate hike requests did include some special discount rate for low-income customers. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out. CUB is participating in all these dockets, and we participated in the workshop process around low-income rates, et cetera. We already have a really good low-income rate in Illinois. It's the percentage of income payment plan, or the PIP for short, but it's sorely underfunded, and there's a very limited number of people who can get on that. So ideally, you could expand that, but just another thing that's kind of in the policy sphere that will be, there's more to come on that, I believe.
And I'm just going to ask Kate. Kate, is it possible? I think I just put the Help Illinois Families link in the chat. I'm wondering if you could. I just want to make sure I did it so that everybody can see it, if you don't mind. Thank you. Okay, let's thank you, Sarah. Let's go on to the next one. These are all great questions, great discussion. Okay, let's talk about solar. Switching to solar. Sheila and Dorothy, is now the time to try solar? Do you know the costs or a reputable company? And Dorothy says, I'd like to switch from ComEd to solar power. Which solar power company would you suggest?
Great questions. It's so exciting that people are really interested in getting on solar. That industry has come a long way since I started at CUB. It's become a lot more affordable than I ever thought it was going to be, thanks to declining costs of the stuff itself, the panels themselves, and also the various incentives that are out there. So now is a really good time to go solar. We have the federal tax credits in place that can cover a big chunk of the cost. Now, of course, that's after the fact, so you still have to pay upfront and all that, and you have to have some form of tax liability in order for that to work for you. But that doesn't all have to be in 1 year. It'll roll over if your tax liability isn't big enough in 1 year to cover the chunk that would be covered. So that's one good feature. There's also the state incentive that originally came out of FEJA, the Future Energy Jobs Act, and was built upon by CEJA, created a great state program to make solar more affordable. And also coming out of FEJA and continuing to now is the option to go with community solar. So if you're like me and you live in an apartment, or if you don't own your house, or you live in a heavily shaded area or whatever, and you can't, for whatever reason, not get rooftop solar on your own property, you can now sign up for community solar. And there are a number of community solar offers out there, and CUB has a lot of information about that on our website. But when it comes to any of these solar offers that are out there, I'm afraid I can't recommend a particular installer. I know everyone wants CUB to do that, but I'm not sticking my neck out for any of these guys. But I can tell you that many of them are good, and you can shop around. We have a fantastic resource that we publish. I'm really proud of. It's the CUB Solar Guide that you can access, and it is a comprehensive guide about how solar panels work, what kinds of things to consider if you are wondering if solar makes sense for you, and it helps you understand what kinds of incentives are out there. You know, solar can pay for itself in as little as 6 years nowadays. It depends a lot on how big your system is, et cetera, but the payback period is remarkably low. Illinois also has a great income qualified solar program to make sure that lower income folks can take advantage of the clean energy economy and the energy and money savings that can come from renewable energy. So I would say that our solar guide, I see Kate is putting a bunch of great resources in the chat there. We have so much information about it, but we also do presentations about solar pretty frequently. And I believe we have at least one archived on CUB's YouTube page if you ever want to watch one of our talks about it. But that's been an interesting story about CUB too. And apologies everybody. I kind of feel like part of the purpose of this webinar this evening is just to kind of cheerlead for CUB a little bit, because you are some of our really honored supporters. But that is another story of where CUB was nimble enough to step in to help people out. Back when FIJA was passed and you started seeing all of these solar installers enter the Illinois market, there was no place for customers to turn who had questions about this stuff. Like, people were calling, and I'm not trying to put these other organizations on blast. I mean, I like these organizations, they were calling environmental organizations. They were calling like the Illinois Solar Energy Association and stuff, like all of these groups that specialize in clean energy policies, but they didn't have any of the capacity to actually help regular people who wanted to take advantage of these new opportunities. And so we didn't have anyone on staff who specialized in solar for consumers. I'd done a couple presentations alongside other folks, but we just start getting all these calls from people who just didn't even know what to do, where to turn. And so, like, okay, well, I guess we got to learn about solar now. And we had one staffer in particular who was very passionate about it, and she studied up on it and started taking the calls about that. And that has turned into a full-time job at CUB that we always keep staffed, solar programs administrator, to kind of be our point person on this stuff. So there's a lot of options out there, and we are here to help. Did I answer all those questions that were embedded? I have a list of them here that were embedded in that you asked, Jim.
I think so. Did we talk about Solar Switch?
Oh, so no, we haven't talked about Solar Switch.
Talk about solar group buys. We have a couple questions. Julian, how many signed contracts did we get through the Solar Switch program? Marina told me this week it's up to 120, which is near record. And also James asked about entering into a solar group buy. I wonder if you could talk about Solar Switch.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So one of our, I was at a presentation with a colleague a few years ago, and we knew about the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. They ran these solar bulk purchasing programs, basically, where they would partner with local entities like county governments or municipalities or consumer advocates to vet, to put out an RFP, ask local installers if they would like to work with us. In return, we would do public education and outreach about how solar works and answer a lot of folks' questions and get people like in the door. And then in return for that, the installer that we picked, and they had to go through a pretty rigorous vetting process. We used this big rubric to score their applications. In return, they would offer a discount for the installs for people who signed up through that program. So that's how we started our solar group buy program a few years ago. It's gone through a couple of name changes. We first called it Solarize Chicagoland, then it became Grow Solar Chicagoland, and now it's Solar Switch. And we're learning more every year, and it's become pretty streamlined. And we've helped a lot of folks go solar as a result of it. We are also running, like I mentioned, the geothermal group buy through this, which is not quite closed to new applicants, but it's getting there. If folks are interested, you should look that up. But I think the question I saw had to do with adding additional panels to your roof, which I thought was very interesting. I don't have it in front of me. I have another screen here that I'm looking at, but I think it was from someone who had already installed solar on their roof, but they wanted to build on that, but was having trouble getting an installer to do it because it wasn't lucrative enough for them, which is a fascinating issue. And I confess that's the first time that that kind of issue has been brought to my attention, although I suspect our solar expert on staff has probably heard something about this, but I think that's something I can take back to her and mention. We now work very closely with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, so that's something we can take back to them too, and hear if they've gotten feedback along those lines, and see if there isn't something that we could try to do for those kinds of folks. I don't know how many people are affected by that issue, but it's worth mentioning in the venues that I can, for sure.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up, James. We appreciate that. Dr. Paul asks, how long does it take for the savings generated from going solar to cover the costs associated with solar? I've seen 6 to 10 years. Does that seem right?
That nowadays is pretty normal from what I've heard. Yeah.
And with the caveat that the time frame could be longer or shorter depending on your system costs, estimated energy savings, and incentives available. And now there's never been a better time to go solar because the incentives are at an all-time high. So we also we can go on. We've got a little bit of time here. I'm in a Sharon asked in the chat here. I'm in a 3-unit condo building and wonder how to find out whether we can convert to solar energy usage.
Yeah, so great question. I live in a condo building too, and our board president was asking me about going solar. It's challenging on a multifamily building because the mechanism by which ComEd pays you for the solar that you generate is through your bill. So if you have one solar array on your building, that will be affiliated with one bill on the building. So if all 3 of your units have a separate ComEd bill, there's no easy way for the solar that's generated by that system to be like distributed across all of your bills, if that makes sense. You could install a little bit of solar to cover common area. So if you have a common area ComEd bill, that could be an option there. But it's hard. We've talked to a lot of people about this, and this might be something, if you're really curious about chasing it down, you might want to send us an email and we can connect you to our solar specialist. But if you want to take advantage of the kilowatt hours being offset on an actual ComEd bill, it gets tricky if all of the units in your building are separately metered and get separate bills from ComEd. And on top of that, of course, there are requirements, especially depending on what municipality you live in, having to do with how to affix the solar panels to your roof. I have heard from people that the city of Chicago in particular can be persnickety about attaching the solar to your roof. Something our former executive director, Dave Collada, used to complain about a lot. He had a flat roof home and found out that the amount of ballast that he would need to add to his solar array to meet the city of Chicago requirements would render the array too heavy for his roof. So that kind of rabbit hole is part of why advocates have been clamoring for the city of Chicago to resurrect a Department of Environment to help homeowners and Chicagoans kind of navigate some of the codes issues, but it's tricky. That said, it's not out of the question, but it's hard. Another option would be to, of course, utilize community solar, the community solar mechanism, which of course, there's a community solar farm somewhere in ComEd's territory that you can subscribe to, and then through virtual net metering, you can get credited right back on your bill. That's the only form that virtual net metering really functions in Illinois, but kind of the hurdles to being registered as a community solar provider to take advantage of that virtual net metering are quite a bit more onerous than I think your typical 3-unit building can handle. So these are all things that CUB is a member of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, and these are all things that the ICJC has so many subcommittees, and somehow I get all of those emails There's a renewables subcommittee. There's a solar for all subcommittee. There's an energy efficiency solar subcommittee. There's a jobs subcommittee, but there's a whole bunch of them that are about renewables, and we participate in those alongside environmental groups, and groups like Vote Solar is really key on this issue, on these issues. So we're always talking about what the next piece of legislation is going to include. And I know improving the solar offerings and streamlining the solar situation in Illinois is a big agenda item. So you're not the first person to ask about multi-unit buildings. Like I said, we've talked about it in my building, and it's there are still a lot of barriers to that, unfortunately.
We have a ton of questions to answer yet, Moskowitz. So let's get moving on this.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm so long-winded, everybody. I knew this would happen.
It's okay. As David always say, there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to unpack. So implementation, it means everything. Julian asks again, is there any way community solar vendors can give monthly updates to those who have signed up and are on the waiting list? This has been a big thing. That's just a matter of contacting the companies, right? And urging them to communicate with potential customers, I would imagine.
I would love that. I would love that. I'm sighing because the Illinois Power Agency is a state agency that's in charge of our portfolio, our renewable portfolio mix in the state. And the folks who run the Illinois Power Agency are great. They have very strong consumer advocacy kind of credentials. They take very seriously the chance for fraud and malfeasance in the renewable energy industry. And so they have put in place a lot of rules to protect consumers in the solar market. And things like requiring installers to present a disclosure form to their customers that they get signed, that they then put on file with the state, for example. The issue is the installers hate it. They hate that stuff. I've been on, and I don't mean to be flippant. I mean, we need the solar industry, but a lot of the solar industry are companies that work nationwide, and they come to stakeholder sessions at the Illinois Power Agency and, for lack of a better term, whine about the requirements that the state of Illinois puts on them to work in this space. And so a simple thing like that, you would think, come on, just send us an email every once in a while. But they're like, this would add cost. This would be like a bit, setting up like, so yes, I would love that. I think that's something we can add to the list that we want them to do for sure. Because yeah, I have a friend that I had recommended she sign up for community solar, and she got on a waiting list. And I forgot we even had this conversation. It was over a year ago, and she just told me recently that she was able to get on. I mean, it had been over a year for her. So yes, time passes and you just want to know what's going on. And I agree. I think that's one of the many problems. There have been quite a few issues around kind of where the rubber hits the road on how these solar entities kind of interact with their customers. And the state is trying to do the right thing, but it's not as easy as you would think. Just asking the solar company to do that is not going to yield anything. You need the regulator to force them to do it.
Let me ask a couple more. Roberta asks, can you please tell me about potential ripoffs? I'm going to take a guess here. Obviously, you need to be aware of robocalls. Anybody calls you up to sell something, that's trouble. Beware. But what about looking on your electric and gas bills for ripoffs? Where would you look first?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, ripoffs. If in doubt, just right off the bat, don't sign up for anything on the spot. You know, someone approaches you at a farmer's market, like someone did to my friend, another friend a couple weeks ago, and is like, hey, I'm going to sign you up for green energy and it's going to cost less than ComEd. They might be really nice. They might even believe that themselves. Like, that's the thing. A lot of times I think the salespeople actually don't realize that they're lying. Sometimes I think they do, but don't sign up for anything on the spot. Get some materials. Don't give them any of your information. Ask them for some materials and then look into it yourself. Call CUB, look at our website. That's advice number one. But yeah, look at your bills. We have fact sheets on our website. You know, if you wanted to know what all those little charges are for, we define it on some of these fact sheets. But also, you can sign up for one of our utility bill clinics. We can sit down with a CUB staffer one-on-one, and we'll look over and see if there's any ripoffs on your bill. Or you can send copies of bills over to our office, and we can do it kind of remotely and give you a call to talk over what we see. But I mean, mainly do your research, because there are a lot of ripoffs out there, but not all things are ripoffs. You know, like for example, community solar, like sounds too good to be true, but actually community solar is pretty good, and most community solar offers out there will save you money. But yeah, how do you tell the difference? Talk to us is what I would advise.
With community solar, you save. Well, so right now all the deals are out there are savers, but with alternative suppliers, electricity suppliers, since 2015, people have lost more than $1 billion in Illinois. Especially now, ComEd and Ameren's rate has plummeted from what it was a year ago. So there are a lot of companies out there talking about high rates and trying to sell you some really bad plans. So do not give your bill out at your doorway. If they get your bill, they get your account number, they can sign you up. It's a scam called slamming. It happens all the time. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, we got a couple distribution charges questions. I want to go to cable real quick. And Bill asks, what does he ask here? He asks, how can I know when the added charges to my Comcast bill are valid? That's a tough one. Just to tell you is there is a movement afoot right now. Consumer Reports is leading it to try to get the cable companies to be more honest about these add-on charges, like the TV broadcast fee, the regional sports fee. They don't ever give those amounts when they give you the advertised price. These are all in addition, but they jack up your bill by 20 to 30%. So there's a movement afoot now to try to get the cable companies to be more honest in their billing. Maybe now that we have a full FCC, maybe we'll make some progress on that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Sarah.
Yeah, I think cable bills, well, first of all, cable isn't regulated. Yeah, that should be obvious to everybody. These guys can basically do what they want, right? That's the problem. But it's nice when you see, I like seeing detailed bills that parse out all the charges, but it also can kind of lead one to believe that you can opt out of some of those charges when in fact you can't. I've talked to lots of people who are mad because they don't ever watch broadcast TV, and yet they have to pay this broadcast TV fee, for example. But it is hard to parse it out. And when it comes down to it, a lot of those things you can't get rid of. You cannot get rid of. But some of them maybe you can. If you are with a cable company that allows you to purchase your own modem, for example, your own modem and router, that can be one way to save. If you're with a cable company that's charging you for some kind of like wire maintenance or something like that, that's something that you could probably get rid of. But a lot of those fees are things that you are stuck with unless it's something for premium channels that you might not necessarily want. But yeah, these guys are trying to do whatever they can, especially as more people just switch to internet only and decide to stream their stuff online. But that's complicated. That every time I go home, I show my mom how to stream on her TV.
That's great.
Sorry, Mom. So to be really sure, you can send your bill over to us at CUB, and we'll take a quick look at it for you.
Absolutely. One more quick question. In a minute, maybe, former CUB board member Valerie asks, what is the future of electric vehicles and charging stations in Illinois and nationwide.
Wow, in a minute. It's going to grow a lot. It's going to grow a lot. I mean, I think just we're looking at the curve of EV sales, and it's just kind of doing this, right? But we're going to need to, sorry, big noise outside. We're going to need to make sure that when all of that additional EV load, all those electric vehicles come online, that the charging is happening in a managed way, so that we're not seeing more spikes in electric usage, because that leads to issues around just purchasing more capacity, to problems with reliability. But what really keeps me up at night is how we're going to electrify long haul trucking. I have been invited to speak on a couple panels about that. And some folks are talking about how it will cost, like, basically to convert a giant travel plaza to support electric trucks will require electric capacity rivaling that of a medium-sized town, which from a ratepayer advocate standpoint is terrifying. Of course, I just think the travel plaza should pay for it, but they're going to be trying to get those fees to be covered by utility ratepayers. So that's going to be kind of a big fight. We agree that stuff needs to be electrified, and CUB has put out a series of publications about the electrification of transportation, an EV buying guide, but also some policy briefs about transportation electrification. And we do believe that done right, electrification can actually help suppress rates across the board, but it has to be done right. And we need to make sure that it's done wisely and not in an uncontrolled fashion, or else that could be disastrous. That was probably more than a minute.
No, it's okay. A few things to wrap up, and thank you so much, Sarah. I wish this could go on for a couple hours here. We've got to wrap up, everybody, but thank you for all the great comments. Marty Kleb says the CUB cable guide helped me cut my cable bill by more than $100 per month. You can get it at citizensutilityboard.org. John, I know you had a couple comments about net metering policy. I'm going to get back to you about that, I promise. I did see your comments about that, and I will get back to you. Just wanted to say real quickly, we've drawn 2 names of lucky winners of the $25 gift cards. They are our friend Julian Brown and Christine Olson. Congratulations. We'll be reaching out to you via email to get you those $25 gift cards. Also had some questions about distribution charges. Lawrence, I will get back to you about that also. That's an ongoing fight we have. We fight in the rate hikes. Anyway, we love you all. Thank you so much for all your energy and all your support. And we really appreciate you. And Sarah, we appreciate you. And thank you for giving us your time tonight.
A pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely evening. We'll all be in touch.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.